Simon Tolkien, the son of Christopher Tolkien and grandson of J.R.R. Tolkien, is the series consultant of the Rings of Power. However, being his grandson does not determine the credibility of the show, with his main issues being decisions made upon the show and complacency. He is also known for his own novels such as No Man's Land, Orders from Berlin, and The King of Diamonds, with one of them being dedicated to his father. His parents were separated when he was 5. His grandfather read Lord of the Rings to him, and he has been a fan since he was 9. Simon was 14 when his grandfather passed. Simon might have enjoyed Lord of the Rings, but he wouldn't react as strongly to adaptations as much as Christopher Tolkien, who was more involved in JRR's posthumous works and publications. At first glance, it would seem Simon had rifts with his father, Christopher Tolkien, due to creative differences, but they later reconciled. The differences they navigated seemed to be more of a difference in interest based on media and generational gaps, with Simon initially wanting to embrace film adaptations of JRR's work and Christopher not wanting to embrace them and instead stick to the source material, believing that novels in general are unsuitable to such transformations. Simon later had something to say about the Lord of the Rings films, but we would not see this until the Hobbit movies were filmed. There was a rumor that Tom Shippey was fired after the death of Christopher Tolkien, since he was telling Prime Video they were polluting the source material. Vanity Fair said that Shippey was fired for unsanctioned interview to a German fan site where he opined on what the show could and could not explore. Simon Tolkien was hired shortly after. It seemed that as a Rings of Power consultant, Simon did what he wanted, though he was not the main writer. He did not write the Rings of Power. However, it is possible he was oblivious to the impact of such changes involved in the Rings of Power. An article on The Independent a few months before the release of Peter Jackson's first film, Fellowship of the Ring, cites that Simon and Christopher had an estrangement, perhaps concerning the Peter Jackson editions of Lord of the Rings films. Simon added, "I believe that my father's determination to exclude me from involvement in my grandfather's literary legacy cannot be morally justified." Simon wanted to embrace the films, but Christopher did not want to. In fact, as mentioned here before, the latter would go on to not like the films once they released. "My own position is that The Lord of the Rings is peculiarly unsuitable to transformation into visual dramatic form," Christopher said. Eventually, during the release of the Hobbit films, Simon rejected the films due to being too close to the source material, but this was after the release of the Hobbit films, since in the BBC he declined any rumors that he didn't enjoy them for whatever reason. My problem with the films was really that I think Jackson was kind of too faithful to the books. He kind of put too much into it, and so there's too much going on. I would have liked more character and perhaps following his own course, so I think with the Hobbit films, it's interesting how he thinks that the Lord of the Rings films are too close to the source material, unlike his father, who was highly concerned with sticking to it and didn't enjoy the movie because it strayed too far away from it. Simon thought Jackson should have taken more liberties with the Lord of the Rings movies, for example in The Hobbit. It would largely depend on the point of the statement. While Simon wasn't as involved in the Rings of Power as it seemed at first glance as a series consultant and not a main writer, the main point was that he did not stop certain changes to the lore that he might have been able to as a grandson and fan of J.R.R. Tolkien and his works. Sure, Christopher couldn't exactly stop Jackson from filming, but he already decided not to be involved prior to the film's release. But while Simon wasn't the writer, he was involved in the Rings of Power. Simon could have nudged the writers more towards a show that would be truer to his grandfather's legendarium and the source material while making Rings of Power related decisions, but it is unknown exactly why he did not, though we can speculate. However, it is possible that it is because Simon didn't know as much, or that he simply wanted the show to go towards a certain direction that's not too close with the source material for whatever reason. Simon's views on the films may be a reason for his ideas as series consultant for the Rings of Power, though he was not the main writer. During his interview about being under the Tolkien name, it seemed that he had a desire to be known for things other than J.R.R. Tolkien's grandson. But while they could be related, they are not mutually exclusive.